Hello, Global Communication class. This is our second to last lecture, and today we're going to be discussing multimedia conglomerates, their influence and global reach. This is not going to be a very long lecture because you've read in our textbook most of the information. I'll just kind of emphasize the important points, and I also want to say that I'm focusing here on American multimedia conglomerates, but in your online exercise number 4, you will look for other than American conglomerate to write about in addition to the American conglomerate. Why I'm focusing on American conglomerates primarily is because they are indeed the largest and they have the most influence, and you will certainly remember a few of those other ones and know after this class, but information about American conglomerates are certainly, I would think, much more useful in terms of thinking of the global reach, global influence, and global media product. So, a couple of things that I think is very important to know based on our reading is what our book emphasizes, and that is number one, in terms of the revenue, meaning the what they earn, the three largest global media empires are all American. So Disney, Time Warner, Viacom, they're all American, and they are largest in the world, not just in America. And second, in terms of electronic colonialism, the idea that they all indeed promote American values, American way of life, way of thinking, and one would want to ask, what is the problem with that? What is the problem with American values? And certainly there isn't a problem with American values. In fact, values in democracy and freedom and other kinds of things that we know as being American are certainly, values a lot of countries around the world should uphold. But the problem is more in terms of way of life, a specific kind of thinking, in terms of exclusion of other ways of thinking. So when we are exposed to always the same narrative, always the same story, always the same values, always the same ideas, the question is, can we, be creative? Can other people around the world have an opportunity to show their way of life, their ideas, etc.? And the idea that it makes the world a more homogeneous place and impacts cultural diversity in potentially negative way. Here's a quote from CEO of the Walt Disney that stunned many people. He said, "We have no obligation to make history, we have no obligation to make art, we have no obligation to make a statement, to make money is our only objective." And this is basically another idea that is weaved through the reading. Is this all that's happening, that culture product that we are getting from these media conglomerates? Is it all about making money? It might not even be about true values and true ways of life, but it's really about making money. So, meaning everything goes. And that's kind of concerning to a lot of people. So here's the list of multimedia conglomerates. Obviously, those that I highlighted in red, and I earlier said the Viacom is the third one, but recently actually the News Corp became the second largest, and they purchased Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones. That put them on a second spot. So Disney, News Corp, and then Time Warner, and then Viacom is after that. So this list slightly changes. Obviously, General Electric recently kind of disappeared from the picture because of the Comcast, and I'll talk to you a little bit about it. Vivendi and Bertelsmann are the two non-American ones, and Sony as well. So these three, Japanese, French, and German, Japanese, French, and then obviously AT&T and Comcast somehow made it to the list because they are cable company and cell phone companies, and they are competing fiercely these days on this media conglomerate competition. So this is sort of a list, a little broader list than your book gives us, but certainly a really important list. These are the international players in terms of multimedia conglomerates, so remember those names because you will see them in the media. They really dictate what kind of cultural product we consume for the media from the time that we are kids to the old age, and that includes everything from broadcasting to newspapers, magazines, internet, video games, etc. So going global is a big theme, and really it's a big goal of these conglomerates. And at times, as I already mentioned, these global conglomerates can have a progressive impact on culture, but sometimes that impact is not so progressive. But here in case of Google, Google opening in China should be capitalized. It allowed Chinese access to the open internet, which is different from the compartmentalized, extremely biased government-controlled media. However, there are some issues with Google in China. In fact, Google moved out of China because the whole idea that there would be some kind of an open access to internet in China was kind of a dream of a Google more than an actual realization. And when you think about that in terms of global politics, then global media conglomerates and global politics are sometimes in sync, but oftentimes are not. And this example shows that pretty well. The global commercial media system is radical in that it will respect no tradition or custom. So really when these organizations go global, they bring their own way of life, they bring their own ideas, and no traditional custom really matters in that sense. Here are some of the milestones. This media conglomeration has sort of started in early 80s, and there were a lot of first mergers that were happening in early 80s, and there were 50 leading conglomerates, media conglomerates. By 1987, there were 29. By 1990, 23, 1997, 10, and today, as you see, only 5 in America. So in the US, that shows you incredible progression of merging and conglomeration, and this is the result. One of the largest milestone is actually the 1987. The biggest media merger in history was $340 million dollar deal when AOL Time Warner merged. And by 2000, AOL Time Warner's 350 billion merged corporation was more than 1,000 times larger than when it started. So it just shows you what that merger did and how much it impacted these two companies and put them almost on the top of all media conglomerates. The idea that most citizens get their views and understandings of the world around them from the mainstream media is what really is in terms of electronic colonialism that our author Thomas McPhail is thinking about. That influence on the mind of people is what he's getting at when he says that we should really think about these conglomerates and what kind of values and ideas are being pushed. through their products that they are selling around the world. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of them, just American, as I said. Obviously, number one, Disney, increasing size, owning the ABC News station, enormous, what we call a vertical integration. There's have been increasing criticisms of Disney. From business perspective, they have been very successful, implemented the most appropriate strategies to expand and grow. But criticism is that, very narrow, like that quote, business-minded kind of strategy towards just selling the idea or product without any respect for like race, ethnicity, culture. But in recent years, Disney has addressed these criticisms globally, and some people say it's again just for business and it's not really making such big change. But we've seen more stronger female characters, for instance. We've seen more ethnicities, different ethnicities and races being present. However, there's still a lot more to be done. News Corporation, if you haven't heard of the name Rupert Murdoch, now you're hearing it. He's Australian. He's built one of the largest, now second largest, media empire in the world. Only since 2004 did this News Corporation become an American media conglomerate. Until then it was Australian. They have tremendous influence on media in the UK, in many other countries, UK meaning United Kingdom, and in other countries in the world. But they focus on television, films, books, newspapers, cable, satellite, and sports. Almost everything is on the list. Recent acquisition of Dow Jones and Wall Street Journal kind of sealed the deal, put them really high on top of important media conglomerates. And this company has been also plagued by a lot of controversies. Your book talks about phone hacking scandal in UK, United Kingdom in 2011 is just one of them. Basically, Murdoch's sons also are part of the company, and there is some kind of rifts between Rupert Murdoch and his son, one of the sons who is leading the company. So there's always controversy surrounding this company, along with the idea that everything they purchase they make into a very politically conservative media as well. That's another criticism. Time Warner, their strategic plan is really to do major mergers, and it really made it one of the most powerful in the world. In 1989, Time Incorporated merged with Warner Communications. In 1996 with Turner Broadcasting System. Turner Broadcasting System actually owned CNN, and actually from that point they really focused on a global reach in terms of broadcasting. They started CNN International to compete with BBC World and other international companies, primarily BBC World. CNN, for instance, was the first international or US and any international broadcasting system that broadcasted from Cuba. And that's before our President Barack Obama started to straighten those relations. So they really truly want to do global reach, including all of the possible countries without exclusion, thinking that that's a really good business. And then Viacom, they purchased CBS, and by that purchase they own 35% of US broadcasting market. It's huge. Networks, broadcasting, entertainment, video, music, theme parks, and publishing. Some of you probably know it more. Viacom owns Nickelodeon, and that's where they are going really global from business perspective. They are creating a global media group. They created it in 2011, and their goal is to spread Nickelodeon worldwide, and it's currently in many countries in the world. just like MTV, that they also own, but that started way back in 1990s. So you have MTV Australia, MTV UK, MTV France, and MTV everywhere in more than like 20 countries in the world. And we'll talk a little bit about that next time when we touch upon culture. So CNN and MTV and stuff like that we'll talk about next time. And then Comcast. By purchasing NBC Universal from General Electric in 2011, it expanded its reach beyond just being a cable operator. And from business perspective, recent talks that Comcast and Time Warner might merge in 2014 scared many, and it was deeply opposed by other companies too, and it was called off in 2015. That would basically create a monopoly on cable in many places. Even though there's Verizon on the other side, those two would have the largest share, and that by some was not a very good idea, and that was for now stopped. But how it's gonna develop from here, we still don't know. Maybe this will continue, but as of now, it's called off. Some people say all this media conglomeration is a big conspiracy. So the large numbers deepen the problem of exclusively concentrated control. If the number of outlets is growing and the number of owners declining, then each owner controls even more formidable communications power. And that's basically the idea behind it. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's basically business theory. And it's really working for them. Currently, the big quest is the quest for internet. Who's going to own? Can you really own it? Well, there are currently enormous problems in digital divide, and while it's still in its infancy, the internet has allowed enormous amounts of information to be exchanged and made available, obviously, with advertising. 60% of all minutes spent online in the US dwindled 87% from 110 in March 1999 to 14 in March 2001 due to success in advertising. Marketing is the key to overcome the barrier for online entry. So as you can see, that's basic reason why these companies are in pursuit for internet as well. They further point out that within 14 companies, it's heavily skewed towards the top 4. Key factors driving media consolidation this way include mergers and acquisitions, turning powerful companies into even more powerful media behemoths, and that's basically what is happening. I would say Fantastic Five, but Comcast's not really yet there, even if it's slowly creeping up. But soon. There's also something people call a mainstream revolution, the rise of blogging, other forms of social media. The internet has enabled people to report more quickly about events, and some say that, people are able to create their own content. They don't need to always rely on the mainstream media or the media that is owned by these conglomerates. But some journalists who do work in the mainstream media are concerned about the future of impact of citizen journalism, and what's it going to do to professional journalism. So there's always two sides of the coin, but the thing is nobody is really wanting to have a hand on internet because we need this kind of ability for people to have an outlet where they can freely go and express their ideas and create new media forms if possible. So congratulations, media conglomerates. So they started evolving and spreading as far back as 1983 in less than 20 years, 30 years. What was 50 companies fighting, now have consolidated to only 5, so I would say less than 30 years, but really it reached that number in 20 years. So of those 5, the top 3 consist of 60% of all of the market, including the global market. So the online exercise 4. We read in our readings the multimedia conglomerates influence spreads around the globe. For your 4th exercise, you should find information online on the American multimedia conglomerate and one non-American multimedia conglomerate. So 1 American, 1 non-American. And then you will do the following. First, find what is the global mission of that company, of both of them. Find out what kind of product they're selling globally. Find out how they impact global communication. Of course, they're impacting global communication, but if you can more specifically say how they're doing it, and if you can find out what is their most successful global product, whether it's a film or a theme park or something like that. And just like for online exercise number 3, you will write 1 page, narrative form report, and don't please copy and paste. Some of you have that issue where you didn't cite and you copied and paste stuff from internet. You need to put in your own words. And please make sure you connect to the reading whenever possible. And that's your online exercise 4. Okay, thank you so much for listening to the lecture. Thank you so much for participation in this class, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you.